Hey Tony, this is Benny, creative director here. We are just getting started. Vignesh and Peter and Krista will be joining very shortly.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Afternoon where you are. Where are you?
San Francisco.
Ah,
How about you?
I am Brooklyn based, especially after daylight savings. It is definitely pitch black out.
Huh.
All right, let's see.
Tony, excited to have you on here today. Excited to talk about
Excited to be
all
here.
these different things. Today's been a big day. It's been a real big day. There's so many Twitter spaces right now just talking about all these various various topics. But I think you're one of the best people for the job.
Great to be here, man. Thanks for inviting me.
We'll just give it a little bit, see if any others join.
Oh yeah, these things always take a little while for folks to join up. I host my own every week.
How are you?
Hi, Krista. How you doing?
Good. How's Marina doing?
Marina's great. She's working away on yet another art project.
Of course. Fantastic.
Oh yeah. And Peter, my man.
Hello,
my friend.
hello, my
Hello.
friend. Well, we
Good to
need
hear
to
your voice.
have a proper catch up, I think.
We do. Are you back home?
I am. I got back yesterday.
Fantastic. Well, I'll let you get over the jet lag, and then we'll have to do it. I'm going to be in LA next week, actually.
Oh, great. Okay.
It's kind of a company offsite thing, but I might be able to steal away. I don't know, maybe for a cocktail with my friend.
Yes, we have
Meet me
been
somewhere.
talking about your legendary ability to socialize with Amy Peck, for
Oh,
example. So we all have to. Now, Krista's meeting all the VR people, so our worlds are colliding.
We were degens before there were Web3 degens. Were we not, my friend?
Pre-degen.
We were pre-gens.
I mean,
Pre-gens, there you go.
Once a degen, always a degen, though.
Oh, absolutely. It's a state of mind.
Whether that's Web3, whether that's going down DeFi rabbit hole, you name it.
Absolutely.
Now, as these things are recorded, and often I'm not listening live, I'm just what? Should we just start or?
Yeah, I think that's true. People will listen to the recordings.
I
Well,
hate
all right.
having like a 10-minute preamble when I'm listening on the record. So let's just start.
Awesome.
Don't be
Well,
those people. Let's
we
not
got
have that.
We're not
we
those
got our
people.
key guest, Tony Parisi, OG of the Metaverse, actual OG. You know, that word gets thrown a lot around these days. And he's are you co-founder of Lamina One? Is that official, or how do
I'm
you?
the first executive hire. The official co-founders are Peter Vessinis and Neil Stevenson, but I'm the first person they hired to help put the company together and the strategy together, and now run it. And I am on the executive team. We've
Perfect.
hired a few more execs since then, and we've announced a few of those as well.
So Tony is agent Lamina One, but he's our agent Zero.
Agent Zero. I love that.
Can we give you that
handle.
name? I feel like you should have that.
I like that a lot, Peter.
Hey,
Agent
you know,
Zero.
as the wise Elon Musk says, right? All these corporate titles are made up. Chief whatever officer. So it's easy to do.
I'm just tweeting that right now. Agent Zero. I just love that.
I knew you'd love that. I've been thinking. I was like, oh, what can we call Tony? And like, oh, that of course, silly me.
It's official. I am Agent Zero at @0_Metaverse.
Brilliant.
Yes, look ye upon my works and despair. There we go. If you know the reference in the great Ozymandias.
I do know that reference. I think you should give regale everyone with your story.
Listening.
Tony,
what's that?
I think you should regale everyone with your origin story of how you accidentally created the metaverse with your VRML.
I picked up some radioactive thing one day. It was in a heap, and a large toxic dump, and it turned out that gave me time traveling powers. So I came back from the year 2050 to drop Metaverse on everyone in 1994, or something like that. Let's see. Yeah, so software engineer by trade. I was in the tech industry in the Boston, Massachusetts area, cutting my teeth at companies like BBN and Lotus, which are both legendary tech companies of that time, late 80s. And then in the early 90s, my new wife, Marina, and I decided while we were still young, we had to move west. So we went for San Francisco for all the reasons. And I looked up someone I'd met in Boston, a fellow named Mark Pesci, and I know he was kind of kicking around in virtual reality. He'd just gotten off some VR startup that had just failed. There was a consumer VR boom. People don't know this. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, long before Oculus came around. It was a first attempt to try and make it commercial, put it in the hands of people playing Sega games and Nintendo and all that. And those companies actually had VR offerings. There were entire conferences, there were magazines. If you went through any of the VR boom of 2014 to 2019 or 20, all these things you would have seen with demos and trade shows, people were doing those then. Now, I wasn't doing that. I was just a software guy. And I met Mark after he licked his wounds from the failure of a hardware startup trying to do commercial VR hardware in 1990-ish. And he said, I have this idea. I want to build a 3D interface to the World Wide Web. And at that point, this is late 1993, early 1994. And it was like, what's the World Wide Web? I mean, I knew what it was because I was a techie. I had an email account. I was playing with Mosaic. I was online already because I was in the computer industry. But I thought that was a bit radical and crazy. But I was kind of bored in my day job and said, okay, let's do this. And I loved programming 3D graphics. I was already doing 3D. So we put the prototype together for something that would connect real-time 3D running on your PC to web browsers, and you could click on objects in 3D, and it would launch web pages, and you can go back and forth between the two of them. And we brought that as a proof of concept to the first ever worldwide web developer conference in 1994 in the spring, and that came to be known as the Virtual Reality Modeling Language, or VRML. The entire internet industry that was burgeoning at that time, companies like Netscape, established companies like Apple, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, IBM, long list of companies all went crazy. Microsoft finally jumped in, scared everyone, the bejesus out of everyone with their monopolistic sort of ways at the time. And everyone got together to create these common specs to create 3D on the internet 25 years ago. It was a little early in terms of consumer uptick. In terms of a computer that could run this stuff, you still needed a PC that you would plug a graphics card into. It wasn't even a laptop era yet. And people were connecting on these things called dial-up modems. And if you're old enough to remember what those are, they went beep and boop and squawk over your phone line. So you had a landline, you connect this gadget to it, and it would send these analog signals that turned into digital information over the phone line so that people could get online. So while we were trying to create 3D for the internet, most people were like going to a computer store, buying their first PC, getting it online and going on to, say, America Online or maybe onto the World Wide Web. But we solved a lot of really interesting technical problems, and a lot of those still are the same ones that people are banding together now to solve when computers are thousands of times faster and fit in your pocket. And we have broadband, and we have generations of people who know how to interact in 3D with snap lenses and video games and everything else. And we have millions and millions of people who can create real-time interactive 3D and animations at various levels of skills. All of these things very different from 25 years ago. For some reason, I've been so passionate about this, either too stupid or just too stubborn to do anything else. So I've kind of stayed in the field the whole time, working on real-time 3D projects. Not all games, some video games, some video game technologies, CAD systems, design systems, so industrial applications. And then when the VR boom happened, around the founding of Oculus, the Kickstarter, and then Facebook purchasing them, and the industry losing its mind over consumer VR again, circa 2014. I got pulled out of the woodwork to advise these VR companies, and it was during that period that I met Peter Martin. I started working at a company called Weaver shortly after that, 3D content creation and building a sort of platform and distribution system for VR content and applications. Neville, the founder of Weaver, gave me my first Vive demo before the HTC Vive had even been released. He took me to the super secret room upstairs and showed me this amazing thing called the Blue. It was phenomenal. And so I was hooked again. I was all into it. And that ultimately led to me joining Unity, the company that has the most popular game engine for mobile and lots of the platforms, and has really great tech for building VR applications. And I ran VR and AR for Unity for 6 years. I left that this April with the idea of just going out into the metaverse. Everyone was talking about the metaverse starting last year because Mark Zuckerberg said the words and then rebranded the company. And then all of a sudden, everyone's coming out of the woodwork saying they know anything about this thing and that they're experts at it. And of course, I couldn't sit by the sidelines while that was happening. So I said, that's it. I'm done. See you, Unity. That was fun. 6 years. It's a good run. With no intention of working, just being out there, being fabulous, Mr. Metaverse, working on my music projects. I've written a complete musical, and I'm working on my second one, completing that right now. So I was going to just focus on that stuff when I got the call from Neil Stevenson. And when he calls, you answer. And we had so much in common in terms of shared vision and so much mutual appreciation given this history, and also complete bemusement and consternation around all of the hubbub happening around this thing that Neil created in his mind, that we've all, in a dream that we've all been following for pushing 30 years now. So I was unemployed for maybe 2 weeks, which was not in my life plan. But you know, when you're called, sometimes you have to answer the call and serve. And so here we are. And then I reconnected with my dear friend Peter Martin and Matt, Christy, and Krista on the Zero team. And I've now signed up to advise, and I'm really excited about your mission. And I'm so delighted, Vignesh, that you asked me to join up today. Do you want the longer form of the bio, people? I could keep going.
I mean, that was, what was that, 25, almost 30 years condensed into maybe 7 minutes.
Yeah,
That's
I tell
pretty
it
good.
differently. I tell it differently every time. But anyway, I think the facts more or less typically agree, though, from version to version. Though, of course, Peter, we will have to pick up on the David Bowie thread at some other point in this
Well,
conversation.
funny you should say that, because we've actually just tested a version of the experiential version of Life on Mars, you know, what that Vice did about 8 years ago, where they did a 4-screen room projection. So we just tested that in the orb to bring things full circle. So we will have to show you that. You will love it.
will have to show me that. Fun fact, in 2016, the year David Bowie passed away, I was the front man for the David Bowie tribute band at San Francisco Gay Pride in front of the entire city, checking off multiple items on my bucket list at once. There must have been, I don't know, 250,000 people in the audience, biggest venue I ever played to. So I will fight for the title of the world's biggest David Bowie fan with anyone, including Peter. But we've swapped so many Bowie stories over the years. Actually, we could do a whole space on that.
We could, when we're at conferences, our thing is to do karaoke together, and we both fight for the Bowie role in the duets. But you know, that's another time.
Exactly.
I'm not going to start singing now. You can.
Well, Peter, you should tell everyone what the orb is and what the vision is here, along with Tony.
Well, yeah, let's explain this to everyone. So we were sort of just trying to figure out, like, what's our place in this metaverse, and obviously our desire is to be part of an open metaverse. And right now, you know, there's so much content out there that should be in the metaverse and can't find its way in because everyone's stuck with these 2D galleries and 3D spaces. So there's lots and lots of platforms that enable you to, you know, stick your Bored Ape in a frame in a 3D space, but there's no spaces that allow you to experience, you know, Krista's spatialized artwork, or an artist like James Turrell. So we figured, you know, well, let's build it, you know, build it, they will come, kind of Field of Dreams vibe. And we've built a system that will enable, it's an interoperable system that enables 360 playback, eventually on any platform. Right now, we're limited to open platforms like Hyperfi and Webaverse, but it's really our dream to, you know, explore spatial content in spatial platforms. And right now, we're experiencing 2D content in spatial platforms. So it's really like the beginning of the game industry when everyone was playing Pong. We're currently playing Pong and Space Invaders in the metaverse, and we're trying to, you know, bring in beautiful storytelling and incredible visions, and just really help move things forward. And it's such in alignment, Tony, with what you're doing with Lamina, that we're, you know, we feel like we're just right at the beginning of a new story.
Yeah, and there's just such a shared vision and set of passions that drive our mutual efforts and roadmaps here. Krista said something when I was in an event with her 2 weeks ago at The Economist. I mean, there's a really heady, wonderful set of conversations and panels, and Krista gets up there in this panel and says, the metaverse is an art project. And I mean, I don't know about y'all, but to me, that's as good a definition as any of the definitions we've been hearing. And it kind of, makes it concrete and creates a simplifying vision that when you look at the context of where we are outside of technology, just globally, geopolitically, everything we've all been through the last handful of years, I think you might have also said this too, Krista, we may be at the beginning of a bit of a Renaissance era. And with that in mind, I think a focus on creating beautiful things and sharing them together should be topmost in our minds. Whether we're working on the tech bits of that, the content, the interoperable distribution and discovery vehicles like Zero, I mean, it all is connected into creating, making the world a better place.
Thank you for that, Tony. I mean, I have to say I kind of felt like that you were really a kindred spirit at the Economist conference, because we were probably the only two artists in the entire conference. And I found it quite surprising. Yeah, I mean, everyone else was pretty much on a corporate side, representing Fortune 500 companies or consulting for them. And what a lot of people always miss when it comes to new technology and so much focus on numbers and, the new economy and trillions of dollars, possible revenue, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's like, no, I mean, this is truly the beginning of the greatest creative renaissance of human history. And with the acceleration of AI and hardware capabilities that are coming around the corner, the protocols that we are creating now as creators will determine the architecture of the future. So it's very, very important that we get it right and that we make sure that it's all about beauty and humanity right now, just as you said.
It was definitely you who said that at The Economist, then. Yes, indeed. Sure. And I think, again, what we've all been through lately is, collectively is starting to motivate a lot of us to think about just kind of higher goals and purpose and why we're doing all this. Folks who are in the tech industry, myself included, get really obsessed with the bits and the bytes, and then, the monetary numbers that go along with all that, and how this little gadget's going to disrupt everything and change everybody's lives. And we kind of take it for granted that that's always a good thing. Progress unimpeded is, it's just up and to the right all the time. But, we got to ask ourselves some more fundamental questions right now when we've got existential threats and a lot of things looming that have forced us all to question a lot of things about our lives. So I think it's an interesting moment, and I think it will be, as always, on artists and the arts communities to probably ask the harder questions and take the bigger chances with the answers, not stuck in these little corporate boxes. See my friend Neil Redding there too. He's in the audience. Neil is talking a lot these days. He's my co-host of the Twitter space we run every Friday, Meta Web3 Versus. Neil's talking a lot about what we're doing now with the metaverse as ecosystems, everything being interconnected. I think that lens is actually really valuable as well, that if we can think about how we can make our lives better collectively, and how we're all interconnected, I think that's really valuable right now too. So at some point we should talk to Neil, if not today in an upcoming space, or if you want to chime in later, Neil, about this. I see a deep interconnectedness between the kind of motivations Krista and Peter and I were kind of laying out here, and how we need to think about ourselves as connected to each other, and that nothing is in isolation. The gadgets you use, the money you spend, the things you make. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with all that. You just inspired me, Krista.
Tony, I don't know if you know this, but I met Krista in the Mars house. So I actually met her for the first time in
the metaverse.
Art in the metaverse, in VR, in a house that she built in a game engine. So, doesn't get more. And that's how we actually began Zero, So it began in the metaverse. We should make more of that, actually. I always forget that bit. Born in the metaverse.
That is, you should absolutely use that. That's marketing gold there, my friend. So Vignesh, I don't know if we have an agenda of specific things we want to talk about, or if it's a free-flowing conversation.
No, it's more of a free flow, but I know you wrote the rules of the metaverse, and I'm in the process of reading Balaji's Network State. So I'm getting a lot of synergies from what you're saying regarding, interconnectedness, especially, given the socio-political environment, with polarization, seeing others as them versus us. But what I find interesting is even within Web3, for example, with the orb, right now what we're doing is we have to work with each metaverse individually to make sure the orb works in there. So today we had to call it spatial. A few days ago we had to call it monoverse. How can we get to that fully interoperable, and maybe the standardization or of protocols is there, but how do you foresee getting to that flow where we break down the silos, and there are these highways between all these metaverses or
Yeah, that's
worlds?
great.
Sorry.
I mean, let's poke around at this topic area, and I encourage everyone to chime in on this. For those not necessarily aware, I wrote an essay, a tome, a screed, if you will, last fall called "The 7 Rules of the Metaverse." I actually, I would say probably I didn't write the rules. I kind of channeled them. When I think back about the creation of that essay. It was originally motivated by bemusement and frustration, as I was sharing. Mark Zuckerberg said, "We're a metaverse company," in July of last year. I mean, this is before they rebranded. They didn't rename the company yet. And then literally everyone in the technology industry, the reporters, the marketers, the pundits, the analysts, Jim Cramer and CNBC Financial, right? They're all like, "Oh, the metaverse. This is what the metaverse is." I mean, that's when the word just went crazy, and almost immediately started losing any meaning because everyone was just, a newly minted metaverse expert. So I started getting frustrated by a lot of the online chatter I was seeing with people trying to define it, say what it is, say what it isn't. A lot of it being very naive, some of it being ill-conceived, some, in my opinion, being dead wrong. A lot of it clearly just not having the benefit of some of us have of nearly 30 years experience working in the technology around it and working toward, the goals, the use cases and things we thought would be important to try and enable with this tech. So I started firing off a series of tweets, one at a time, sort of like old man from the mountaintop, just her. And first one, which really, this is the one that if you want to trigger me, just use the word metaverse in the plural. People were saying, this is a metaverse, these are metaverses, and, that's where it started. So rule number 1, I said on a tweet, there's only one metaverse. I did that 6 more times over the course of maybe a week. And then, people would retweet, pick up on it a little bit. And then I started seeing my 7 rules of the metaverse, like literally just lifted and used in people's slide decks. And I was like, oh my God, I better just actually write some substance to this thing. So it sort of started as, me just reactively saying, well, hold on, people, new rules. I decided to be thoughtful about it, spent a few weeks, and put some real effort into trying to frame what I think is going on technologically here. And they're not really rules. They are patterns. They are what I believe are inevitabilities around how this technology is going to shake out. And without boring you to death with all of the details of these rules, I'd say I could kind of summarize it as the metaverse that people are talking about and folks have been dreaming about will be manifest in this coming decade or so. At some point, we can look back at this and say, yeah, we're in metaverse now. Not quite there yet. We see the prototypes in the beginning stages. It will have these certain characteristics. It's not going to be owned by any one company. It's just simply not going to happen. Economic forces will prevent that. And those are coming from multiple directions, Vignesh, so we will get into that. And, technologically, it's got to be based on open standards. I mean, that used to be a really radical notion in the world of 3D development, especially with game companies. You pick an engine. One person's game engine doesn't work with someone else's. Why would I even want my content to work with someone else's game, right? I'm in competition with them for the same user. So there's, all these things that were sort of a manic defense against standards for 3D. Well, again, some of us were out there thinking long-term in metaverse years ago. So there's technological inevitabilities that they're happening already, and they're no different than the standards that happen just so that we can have this conversation. There are hundreds of technology standards that support this Twitter space right now. And the lights in the room that I'm sitting in and the power that's coming into my house. This is no different. This is the only way you can create infrastructure, especially for communications, is by agreeing on a certain set of things they all do in the same way, so that multiple people can make the things, even more people can experience the things, and they don't have to reinvest an entire lifetime again every time they want to experience it in a different place, or anytime anyone wants to create something and distribute it to a different place. So these are all just obvious at this point. And I suppose the good news is I'm going to have to personally find a new shtick soon, because I've been a crusader in this space for decades.